Hello, my name is Roxanne. I am here today as part of a 5-part series discussing domestic violence, specifically through the eyes of a survivor. Here I have with me 3 individuals who will speak a little bit more about this topic for you today. We have Lieutenant Belinda Carroll with the Needham Police. We have Miss Hanna Burnett with the Needham Public Health. And we have with us here Sydney Carter with Reach Beyond Domestic Violence. So first we have some questions for you guys today. So some folks in the community might have heard of DVAC before. But for those who have not, can you tell us a little bit about DVAC?
The Needham Domestic Violence Action Committee, often referred to as DVAC, was established in 1996. It's a community-based committee that was formed to raise awareness on domestic violence and related issues. We felt that there were so many different communities within the town. The committees, we all got together as a collaboration to work together towards that same goal. Different members of the committee, and these are just a few: the police department, the health department, Reach Beyond Domestic Violence. We have the Needham Community Council, Needham Youth and Family Services, also a representative from Denise Garlick's office, and many residents are part of the committee also. So that just shows the magnitude of what people want with the committee and how everyone wants to get together and make a difference.
Perfect. That sounds amazing. So many individuals in the town, committed for this same cause. So another question I would like to ask you all, what exactly is the mission of DVAC? And can you tell us a little bit more about what DVAC actually does in the community?
That's a great question. On our logo, there are 3 words: outreach, prevention, and support. So our goal really is to reach the entire community with the message that domestic abuse does happen, even in our community, but also to give them the tools to recognize some of the signs of abuse and help them prevent from getting into a relationship that might be abusive, and also just to support those that they know that might be impacted by domestic abuse. We also want to support those who are impacted currently by domestic abuse. And while this looks different for every individual, some of the things that we've done in the past is we provide emergency shelter if they have a need for that. We have provided security doorbells and changed locks, and even paid for a summer camp for a child to provide some normalcy in the chaos that they are living in.
And we get more involved with the community, like the silent witness display through our Take Back the Night event, when that's actually a committee it started with DVAC, and then it ended up being a group up at the high school that now takes the primary role in that, and it's in its 16th or 17th year. So they're really passionate about getting the word out there also. So it's the involvement we get with everyone else within the community, both young and old, because domestic violence affects everyone.
Right, and we really we do hope to support the next generation in tackling this issue. So as DVAC, we give out a scholarship to a high school senior who has shown dedication in raising awareness about this.
So it sounds like there's so much that you guys do in the community from high school and older. Why is this work so important?
So it's important even in Needham. So I think people have a preconceived notion that domestic violence doesn't happen in Needham. It's an affluent community, but that's so false. It happens everywhere. For instance, unfortunately, domestic violence calls at the police department have increased 17% from 2022 to 2023. In 2022, we had 76 calls for service. And in 2023, we had 89 calls for service. So we're starting to see an increase, and we're trying to make a difference in getting the resources and the intervention out there for victims so we can transition them to become a survivor. But we are also looking at how turbulent our world is today. And it's not easy for an average person, and then you add that added layer if a person is abused. So we want to make sure that they have normalcy, they get the intervention, and the support that they need through this very difficult time in their life.
Now, how would someone in the community who is just hearing about DVAC how would they get involved in working with DVAC if they're interested in whatever capacity?
So yeah, DVAC as a committee meets once a month, just for an hour. It's every second Friday of the month from 9 to 10 a.m. And currently we just meet over Zoom, which makes it really convenient for anybody to just hop on a Zoom and then continue with their day. We're always looking for more people and new people to come and partner with us, because the more we have representation from the community and the more we have different perspectives and possibilities to meet everybody in their need.
Wow. So it really is easy to get involved. And how do we contact anyone there? If we want to be a part of the Zoom, get the Zoom link sent to us, how do we reach out?
So anybody who's interested can just email me at hburnett@needhamma.gov. And we are happy to add them to the email distribution list, and that's how they end up getting the invite for the monthly meetings.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. And now, Sydney, from Reach Beyond Domestic Violence, can you tell us a little bit about the organization and what you guys do, your connection with the Needham community?
Yeah, absolutely. So Reach Beyond Domestic Violence, also sometimes just Reach, is a local nonprofit based in Waltham. We serve 27 cities and towns. We have quite a big catchment area, and we go as far as Dedham and Billerica, but also to Needham and Waltham and the surrounding areas. Some of the services that we offer is we have community advocacy. So folks in the community call and do an intake and get placed with an advocate. And the advocate really helps with anything that the survivor needs. This could be long-term safety planning. This could be helping with filing paperwork for things like food stamps or housing, but also things like preparing folks for job interviews and accompanying them for court. Advocates really do whatever the survivor needs in the moment. We have a child and adolescent therapist at Reach. She does one-on-one therapy with the kiddos and also group therapy with them as well. She also offers the same services to adults. Folks that can access her services need to be connected to Reach through the advocacy program or through the shelter program. And that brings us to the shelter program. So Reach also has an emergency shelter that houses 8 families at a time. All of the 8 families that live in the shelter have their own space and also the same access to community advocacy as survivors in the community do. And our last program is our prevention program. So prevention programs is the program that I'm a part of. So I go out into the community and I have these hard conversations about domestic violence, trauma, really anything that folks want to talk about or want to know more information about. Sometimes that looks like going and doing a training for various community groups. It could be for the police, it could be for doctors' offices, it could also be having conversations with young folks about what is a healthy relationship. Some other times it might look like tabling at certain community events, or sometimes it looks like working with community groups like DVAC and serving as really just somebody that has a listening ear. Reach also has a 24/7 hotline. This hotline is free and confidential for folks to use from anywhere. Sometimes we have folks calling in from California looking for support. And the folks that can call the hotline are folks that are experiencing domestic violence themselves or might know somebody that's experiencing domestic violence and maybe aren't sure how to support them. There's always an advocate on the phone to talk through the many different experiences people might be going through and helping them find plans that are safest for them. Our community advocacy program is offered in bilingual, in English and Spanish. And then the hotline, folks can call that speak any language. We have a language line that helps us interpret what folks are talking to us about.
Thank you all for sharing. Throughout so far, I've heard that you mentioned the phrases domestic violence as well as domestic abuse. Can you give a more detailed description for those who still are not familiar with the term domestic abuse?
Sure. So there are actually a variation of definitions for domestic abuse, and the definition that we use actually comes from Reach, and we have adopted it for our use. And how they define domestic abuse is that It is a pattern of behaviors where one person gains and maintains power and control over another one in a relationship. And the reason why we like that is because it does not identify a gender, because domestic abuse can happen to anybody and anybody can be an abuser. It also talks about a pattern of behaviors where it is not just a one-time incident. And certainly sometimes the first incidents can be very subtle, but as the relationship grows and the need to maintain that power and control increases, so does the severity of the incidences or the violence. And lastly, in that definition, there is no possibility for mutual abuse. Now, we know that some relationships can be toxic both ways, but we believe that abuse is something that one person does to the other person.
You mentioned patterns of abuse, different types of behaviors, power and control. Can you just elaborate on that as well?
The first type of abuse that we hear the most of is physical abuse, and we usually hear the most about this one because this is the one that we see in the media, or when we see it, we know that there is abuse happening. This can look like anything that really makes somebody feel fear for their physical safety. This can look like hitting somebody, punching somebody. It could even look like throwing things near somebody as well. There's also psychological abuse. This is another one that we hear a lot about, that psychological and emotional abuse. This is belittling somebody, making somebody feel less than, or sometimes folks hear that term gaslighting. This is where that would come in. So trying to convince somebody that their perceived reality isn't their reality. We also know that there is a lot of technological abuse, especially now with the new development of things like AI. So using technology to abuse somebody else can look like tracking somebody's car, creating fake accounts, or sharing information on the internet. There's also sexual abuse, and we typically don't put sexual abuse with physical abuse because there's types of sexual abuse that are not actually hands-on. Right, that could be that sharing of nude photos with folks that the other person didn't consent to. It could also look like any type of sexual harassment or sexual violence against a person. There is also financial abuse, and this one is a really, really big one, right? Because this is one that we really don't see at all. This is when folks are maybe not allowed to work because their partner is telling them that they can't, and so they can't control any of the income. It could look like them just getting a little bit of an allowance, a week or a month or whatever that might be, but also using things like power of attorney or will over somebody to gain financial power. And the last one is one that we don't typically talk about too much, but it's really important. This can look like cultural abuse. So really targeting folks' identities to abuse them. So this can look like maybe outing a partner if they were not out to the community yet. It could be any type of racism, homophobia, cisgenderism that happens between two folks in order to gain and maintain power and control over them. It can also look like religious abuse, so using religious texts to maybe stop somebody from leaving them in a relationship or to justify their abuse.
Thank you all for sharing. Now, can you tell me, as individuals who work in domestic violence prevention, what is the biggest question that you hear people ask when it comes to domestic violence situations?
I think the biggest question, and I'm sure the both of you will agree, is why doesn't a person just leave? Mm-hmm. Like if they're getting abused, why don't they just pack their stuff and go? Mm-hmm. But statistically, it takes a victim about 7 times to permanently leave a situation. So it may be frustrating for a friend or a family member to be kind of helping that victim along and at some point be like, I'm done. Obviously, you don't want to leave, but that's not true. It's just that difficult for them. And I'm sure Sydney can explain more on that because she sees it more often than we do as police.
Yeah, absolutely. That is absolutely the biggest question that I get, right? Why doesn't she just leave? There's a few things about the question that I'd like to kind of unpack a little bit. The first piece is that assuming gender, right? Why doesn't she just leave? We get this one a lot when in groups talking about domestic violence. Again, we know that anybody can experience domestic violence. It's not always a woman identifying person that might be the survivor. And the second one, part of that question that I like to touch on is the question implies that if the person leaves, the abuse is going to stop. We know that a lot of the times when survivors are leaving their relationship, there is an abuser that is losing the power and control over that person. And they really want that power and control back. And this is where sometimes we see things like homicide take place. This is the time where an abuser is really trying to gain that power and control back over that person. Another part about, this question, why don't they just leave, that is important to touch on is that most of the time, if not all the time, or actually all of the time, when we're working with survivors that are in abusive relationships, it's really important to know that they're in this relationship with somebody because they love them, right? Love is kind of the baseline to why somebody's in the relationship with somebody. And leaving doesn't seem that easy, right? When we really love somebody and we believe that, this person wasn't who they were when we first started dating, this is a new person, I can get that old person back, I really love this person, I'm seeing when I think of this person, I'm thinking of all the good things that they've done for me or my family or whatever it might be. This is what we're looking at. This is what we're seeing, right? This is why somebody wants to stay in their relationship. And even more to that, we might often see survivors choosing that security over safety. Well, it might not be safe to stay in the relationship that they're in or to stay in the household that they're in with their abuser. It gives them a sense of security, right? Oftentimes we talk with survivors who don't want to leave their abusive relationship because they won't have housing, or their kids will have to move schools, or they won't have any access to any of their income anymore. Sometimes it's as simple as it's winter time and the only other place I have to go is my car, right? So there's many reasons why survivors are staying in their relationship.
Now, as you've all mentioned, domestic violence affects you regardless of race, gender, religion, socioeconomic status. What are some ways that someone in the Needham community can identify if someone is unfortunately experiencing domestic abuse, domestic violence in their situation?
So there's a lot of signs, and when we're called to domestic violence calls, it's always after the fact the abuse has taken place. And it's actually led up to that point where if family and friends had recognized some signs along the way, there possibly could have been more intervention that could have taken place, so it wouldn't have gotten to the point of police having to be called to the home. And some of the signs would be the power and control. Like if you have a friend or a family member that you always did stuff with and went out to dinner and you always had that nice time together, and all of a sudden that person is being pulled from you and is now in an isolated type of state of being in their life, that's definitely a red flag. And the victim a lot of times doesn't see this happening because it's so gradual. Mm-hmm. And it just becomes a new way of life for them. But from an outsider looking in, they should be able to see, hey, that's not the way you used to act. Something must be going on. And I think it's important too, if you're going to approach this situation and talk about it, it's important to engage in conversation and to speak with and not at. Because a lot of times the victims are spoken at all the time. You do as I say and you don't question what I'm asking you to do or telling you to do. So I think it's important for family and friends to realize that this is a big sign that I think we see a lot. Also, it would be money, restricting cash, credit cards, possibly even the use of a vehicle. And another sign is people have preconceived notions that domestic violence, that's a private thing. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't talk about this. It's not a social thing, but it is. Mm-hmm. When you look at today's world, domestic violence is a public health epidemic, and whether you're directly or indirectly involved, it affects everyone. Mm-hmm. On an annual basis, intimate violence costs annually about $8.3 billion right now. That's an epidemic. And this is why our committee is just so focused on making a difference in people's lives. And other signs that people should be aware of is just, in addition to the isolation, is just always being checked up on. Like, where are you going? Who are you going to be with? How long are you going to be? You're supposed to be home. Like, it's that power and control, and it will always go back to the power and control. And oftentimes, too, people don't want to leave what they have for fear of the unknown. But sometimes it's the unknown that gets you to the brighter stars. And it's a great place to be because now they're getting into the power of positivity, and that's us and the advocates. We've called on REACH several times, and their advocates have been amazing working with victims and have truly made a difference in their lives and truly have helped us out. So, and that's why it's such a collaboration right now.
Going back to what you said, that why it's difficult to leave, one of the other reasons can be that most abusers are very charismatic. They are very well liked by
You say the community?
by the community.
Yeah.
So if I'm the one who's being abused, then I am the only one feeling that this relationship is not right. So if I'm the one who's being abused, then I'm the only one feeling that the relationship is not right. It can really be difficult to say when everybody around me thinks that the guy I'm seeing is wonderful. And it is true that when we hear about domestic abuse in the news, we get this image that, oh, it's somebody that could very easily be identified because they're so terrible human beings. But statistically, really, over 75% of abusers are just very charismatic and well-liked people by their peers. So that poses a challenge to leave as well.
I think too, sometimes we're working with survivors whose partners are maybe the coach of the swim team or involved in the community church or involved in city council. And this person is getting a lot of positive light from the community that they're working with, but they are going home and being abusive towards their partner. Survivor in this case might not know how the community might react if they come out and say, hey, this person's been abusing me, or they might have a fear of what folks might say about them, right? Oftentimes we hear from folks, what did you do to make this person do this to you? We hear a lot of phrases that are putting that blame back on the survivor in cases where their partner has been this upstander in the community. So that just makes it even harder to come out and say, hey, this has been happening to me.
And this goes back also to the cultural and religious abuse, because in some cultures, leaving your spouse or your partner is not as accepted than in others, and same with some religions. It is harder to feel still to be part of the religious community or your cultural community if you have chosen to leave, because it goes against what the culture and religion believes in.
So for individuals looking for that support, what is something that Lieutenant Carroll, that the police department here in Needham can assist them with?
So historically, the police departments in general, Needham included, we've been more reactive than proactive, and we soon realized that there's a problem. We're always going to the same calls, the same abuse calls, and so we need to kind of get ahead of that. And a couple of years ago, they created a community outreach officer position. And this officer now follows up with domestic violence and mental health calls. And this officer also works with our full-time clinician who assists her on these calls. So it's a great way to identify, to go out to assist with the resources, go into courts. It's very intimidating, but to get that intervention that they need to keep them on the right road to become that survivor. And with that, it's important that they know that we're there for them. Like, you're not going to only call us when there's an issue going on, but we're there to help you and to get you the right intervention and the resources before it becomes that issue. So we're more hands-on with everything, and we reach out to REACH, we reach out to the health department, and it's truly a collaboration to make a difference within the community and within the lives of survivors, because I like to deem them survivors, not victims, because we know we can get there.
Thank you all for being here to discuss this very important topic that impacts the Needham community. On the screen is the hotline for Reach Beyond Domestic Violence. It is a 24-hour hotline that you can call to speak to someone for emotional support, for resources, anything that they may need at this time. And always, please remember, if it is an emergency, call 911. In the next episode, we'll be discussing trauma and the court system, and we will have a survivor who will share her story with us, as well as another panel to discuss this important topic. Thank you.